E eu então passaria ao último orador, a doutora Sieglinde Gruber, que desempenhou ao longo da sua carreira inúmeros cargos de alta responsabilidade, nomeadamente a função de Secretário-Geral da Associação Europeia para a Educação dos Adultos e Aprendizagem a Longo Termo, que é um aspecto importante aqui na cooperação, é a própria educação. Foi também responsável na Comissão Europeia, nomeadamente na Direção-Geral da Educação e Cultura, pela gestão estratégica e na implementação do programa Leonardo da Vinci, e atualmente trabalha na Direção-Geral da Investigação e Inovação da Comissão Europeia, sendo responsável pela unidade de cooperação no continente americano, nomeadamente América do Norte, América Latina e Caraíbas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Before I start, I would really like to thank the organizers for providing me with this opportunity to share some of the big endeavors that we have launched and will implement, but we cannot implement them on our own. We need you as well. So before I start actually to talk about more specific issues, I would like to take the opportunity to respond to what was said. First of all, Ellie, thank you for inviting the Commission to look into the very complicated issue of the legal framework when it comes to international cooperation. This goes much beyond scientific and innovation-related issues, and maybe I can share with my colleagues in the Commission that we should actually organize an expert workshop on this, because in one way or another it is linked and it will come back. But I would really also like to thank him for having mentioned to look what is the status of the research in international cooperation, the statut, as you called it. There are many agreements, UN agreements, the Commission adheres to them, but I will not go into the complicated puzzle of competences governed by the Lisbon Treaty, if you allow me so. And thank you also to the last speaker. I did actually not perceive it as a negative picture. It was rather, I think, a very realistic picture. And you mentioned a couple of very important issues, particularly the last one, so that we should not repeat the mistakes of the past, that we need coordination, coordination versus a national focus. And I will come back to this in my own presentation. And thank you as well to Jeffrey, because in a way you really outlined what is done at the European scale, and I'm going to add an international or a transatlantic dimension to this. Now, even yesterday and today, the so-called Galway Statement launching the Transatlantic Research Alliance was already mentioned. Allow me very briefly to maybe mention why it is so important for us. The goals of that statement, first of all, was to better understand the North Atlantic and the Arctic ecosystems, to study the interplay between them, particularly as regards the climate change, and to promote the sustainable management of their resources. And I think we should keep this in mind when embedding it in the international cooperation we have launched, because this cannot be done only at one side of the Atlantic. Hence, and because we coined also as a leitmotif of the whole Research Ocean Alliance that the Atlantic is a shared resource, we have initiated really a very structured dialogue with our partners in the United States and in Canada, and later also in Brazil. Later, that was after May, because the Galway Statement was signed by Commissioner Damanaki and Gagan Quinn, together with the highest level representative from the Department of State in the United States and the equivalent from Canada in Galway in May. So I just wanted to recall this because our scientific and technological cooperation is actually governed as well by what we call an international agreement that we have concluded with the United States on a bilateral basis, with Canada on a bilateral basis, but also with Brazil. We also have agreements with Mexico and with South Africa and with Morocco, just to mention some of, and with Argentina, some of the coastal states. So what we will do, at least from the Commission side, is to embed the scientific and technological cooperation within those agreements. But agreements are very often empty shells. So what is and was very important is that the whole Galway statement was accompanied by and preceded, when we had a conference, by a gathering of very renowned scientists who actually looked into the necessity, what are the challenges that we face on both sides of the Atlantic if we are going to fulfill the objectives I just outlined. And if we look now into the recommendations put forward by those scientists, I can very proudly actually say that we in the Commission have been able to translate them now into concrete follow actions by including in the new framework program for research and innovation called Horizon 2020, a whole set of follow-up activities, follow-up to the Galway statement. And I will come back to this in a minute. But before doing that, I would like to get back to this notion of the Atlantic, a shared resource. When we talk about a shared resource, I would like really to now maybe put into the discussion a different meaning. And this was mentioned just before by Mr. Miranda. It is the coordination aspect. And we, or at least myself and part of my team, we would like to see that the coordination angle is not only between what the European Union is doing with the United States and with Canada, for example, but it is the coordination what is done with EU funding and with national fundings, also in a bilateral way with the United States, with Canada, with other international partners. And I do know from my own experience as for international cooperation that this is a very complicated issue because we do touch upon national pride, national priorities. But if we are going to be serious about claiming that the Atlantic is a shared resource, I think this is absolutely a must to see how can we actually, on our side in Europe, start to share information on what we do and to pool together not only expertise and knowledge and data, but also the necessary resources. And the Atlantic Action Plan and all the discussions yesterday, also to link it to the partnership agreements, that I think was a direct translation and is the way forward on how this should be done. But when we talk about money for science and technology, and the new framework program Horizon 2020 has for all scientific areas and for all activities a very, I would like to say, a fantastic financial envelope of 79 billion euros. But when we translate this into percentages, it only constitutes about maximum 10% of the national funding which goes into science and technology. I do not have detailed figures about the breakdown of what is now really spent on the Atlantic. I do have some rough figures, what is spent per year at a European scale for the maritime by the member states. And I have been given the figure, it is 1.1 1,670 billion compared to the 215 roughly that the EU is putting in. So there I think we have a lot of scope for the future. But let me now go back to this concept of the pooling of resources. It is not, and the coordination element. There are so many different initiatives going on. Very, very successful initiatives, very interesting initiatives. So one other element, this coordination element enshrines, is really how can we make sure that we are not reinventing the wheel, and that is where how can we avoid mistakes made in the past? How can we make sure that we bring all these different actors into the gameplay so that we can really exploit knowledge and what Ellie called as well l'équivalence des compétences, et I would add the connaissances, the connaissances scientifiques, which are available in all these networks, in all the shelves, in all the different projects which are either finished or going on. And with the United States and with Canada, we have adopted and agreed on a three-step approach. First of all, we really want to take stock what exists. And what exists at the EU level, it's our homework, as I said, to broaden it really, what exists at the national level, at the regional level. And only when we have a clearer picture, we can really start seeing where are the gaps. Because on both sides, as Ellie actually rightly said, there is as well a balance. We know that Canada and the United States have invested over many years in science and technology, in observing systems, in eco-management systems, etc. So we would like to see how can we identify better gaps for the future, and how can we align our respective research programs, because we will fund, in the interest of the European taxpayer, we will fund only the European participants through our programs. The United States, they have their own funds, and they have quite a lot of funds, and equally that's the case for Canada. And so this coordination will come at a later stage. Now, we had to do in a certain way, because we have launched all this in May, we had to do a catch-up situation. So we have, yes, the methodology laid down. This is how we are going to work with the United States and with our Canadian partners. However, we have already included in our Horizon 2020 program the first calls to give a very, as I said, direct follow-up to the political statements in Galway. And this, the Horizon 2020 will officially be launched on the 11th of December, so next week. I know that the official launch in Lisbon will take place on the 13th. There is a cross-cutting area which is called Blue. It's the Blue Focus Area, Blue Growth Focus Area. And there are several activities earmarked for the follow-up of the Galway, hence focusing really on the Atlantic. For example, there is in 2014, there will be an activity which looks into developing an observing system for the Atlantic. When I mention 2014, it means that the call actually closes already mid-March 2014. So anyone who would like to join has really to hurry up, because we know that preparatory work is underway. We will look into the sustainability exploitation of the diversity of marine life, and therefore there is an action which closes in 2015 on Atlantic marine ecosystems research and innovation action with quite a substantial envelope of money. There will as well be in 2015 another action which is looking at the response capacities to oil spills and maritime pollution. There are other what we call support actions. We would like to continue to promote the value of the ocean, and therefore we have put into the work program what we call ocean literacy. This should also really be embraced by many of the countries in Europe, but also particularly with the United States and Canada, as they have had quite a long and standing experience. There will be a support action for promoting the interplay between the Atlantic and the Arctic. So Arctic research is equally important, and there we have invited not only the Atlantic partners, but given the complexity of the Arctic, also Russia, because they're part of the Arctic Council. There will be as well a support action for the joint initiative Healthy Oceans, and there we have as well discussed with the coordinators of the joint initiative. They will support particularly as well the transatlantic dimension, hence the Atlantic Ocean Alliance. And last but not least, there will be what we call a backbone, a support backbone of the whole Research Ocean Alliance, where we would like to bring together the different activities. We would like to focus on priority areas such as the marine ecosystem approach, the observing systems, marine biotechnology, aquaculture, seabed and benthic, habitat mapping, and last but not least, ocean literacy. Now, what are we going to ask the consortium to do? In an ideal world, we would like to ask this consortium to facilitate the mapping of all the existing initiatives, all the existing relevant initiatives on both sides of the Atlantics, but we would not like there to confine this only to the North Atlantic. We would also like to extend this to the southern part of the Atlantic on both sides. So it should be governed by what we call the open door principle. We would like this initiative to be connected with other initiatives such as the work of the European Marine Observation and Data Network, EMODNet, which is funded by our colleagues in the Director General MARE. But we cannot talk about seabed mapping without taking into account what is already going on very successfully, launched by that project, and which also links to the different national initiatives where the mapping is going on. We would like the consortium in an ideal world to develop what we call a knowledge sharing platform for access of this knowledge, which was recalled by Ellie before, on both sides of the Atlantic, for guaranteeing that the principle of open access to data governs this platform, because this is something very close to the whole Commission actually policies now, that we have open access to scientific data. We would like this to be linked as well to ongoing global initiatives, such as the GEO or the initiatives launched by major funding agencies, which is taking place in the so-called Belmont Forum. We would like the platform to establish or to build on existing classification systems. So we do know that there are many classification systems. They do not interoperate yet on both sides of the Atlantic. We probably would need to develop a meta language to make them interoperational, and to come up with a classification system which could then be used as well for hopefully future protocols and standards, which in a way would also then, or could be used to develop other more trade-related initiatives. So, and last but not least, another important issue, we should also look into how could we share existing infrastructures? How could we share them? And this was recalled yesterday for the training of the new talents which are needed actually to bring a new dimension to marine resource scientists. So I would like just to put this forward as the main ideas from our side, and I look forward to a successful completion of a consortium, and we will guide whenever people would like to have guidance from our side. We are at the disposal of the community. Thank you very much.